so anonymous with the... No, I can't do that.
Like and subscribe.
Not so anonymous with Eve Reka.
This podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Village Sports at 941 West Pacheco Boulevard. Village Sports carries a wide variety of skate gear and skate apparel, everything from your skate decks to your clothing. They carry brands such as Huff, Vans, Thrasher, on and on. They also carry a wide variety of sports apparel, jackets, hats, beanies, all your new era fitted caps. You can also, whether you're looking to get yourself a fresh white tee for the weekend or a pair of Air Jordan 1s, retro Jordan 3s, he's also carrying a wide variety of Easy Boost and all your Vans shoes and needs. Go visit our friend James and make sure you check out his Instagram at Village Sports. They also have a Patterson location located at 1040 West Las Palmas Avenue, Suite A2. That Instagram is Village Skate Shop, at Village Skate Shop. Hey, thank you, Village Sports. Today we got Gabriella with us. Gabriella has been in my life probably for the better part of 14 years. First time I tried to get clean. It's been a long time, right?
Yeah.
And I met her and her husband sponsored me at that time.
And I was your co-sponsor.
Co-sponsor, right? And he sponsors me today. So
yes.
This woman has been, she's basically like my sponsor mama, right? And she's been important in my life, you know, with my family, with my process, has been a solid person through me with this. And so starting off this podcast, I want to have people like this on here, right? People that I know are truly living a life of recovery. They're doing this in every aspect of their life, right? And, man, I'm just excited to have her on here.
Oh, thank you.
And so, like, I like to ask, you know, people, the first question is like what's your clean date?
6/21/99.
And what does that mean to you?
It means rebirth of life. It means I was able to have a chance to start over. It means that it just, you know, I could go on and on about what it means to me.
Yeah, well, we got a lot of time.
I know we do. And it's really funny because 6/21 is June 21st, and it's actually summer solstice. So I always like to say I got clean on the longest day of the year, which was a long, grueling day. It could be, but it was actually a really good day to get clean.
Nice.
A really good day to get clean. Yeah.
And so, you know, like typically where we hang out at, well, you know, we won't even get into that. Like, what was it like for you growing up? I mean, you weren't born an addict, right? Some people believe they were born an addict, but it wasn't always that way for you. I mean, what was it like for you growing up, coming up? Like, what was your childhood like, right?
Well, you know, and that's the thing too, is we can be born an addict. My mom was an addict. But growing up, it's funny, my story is always at 6, it was the first time I used, at 6. And the first thing I used to change the way I felt was a cigarette. And why don't people go, oh, well, that's not using, but actually it is, because I used that to change the way I felt. Because even at 6 years old, I felt less than, I felt not good enough, I felt not part of. I'm half black and half white, and I was raised in a white neighborhood, and I always just never felt like I fit in. And so I had 2 older kids that I grew up with, and the way we grew up is drugs and alcohol were always a part of our lives. That was a huge part of our lives. Our families were drug smugglers. We had a spot in Saraville, which is in Nevada, where there was a private airstrip. And so we were raised around a lot of drugs and alcohol. So it was like salt and pepper on the kitchen table. There's a whole pile of Coke and a whole pile of marijuana on the kitchen table, and alcohol. We had bootleggers as my aunts and uncles. They made wine, and so that cigarette I picked up, I remember Sean, which is my friend's brother, He grabbed a couple Pall Mall Straights from his mom while everybody was partying in the lodge. We were in the little cabin, and I think about it. I distinctively remember the cabin, the fireplace going, and him pulling out a Pall Mall Straight, and me taking a drag off that Pall Mall Straight. Straight means non-filter for all you people who don't know, all you vapors out there. And I remember the feeling I got when I took that first hit off that cigarette, which was, but I felt like I fit in. Right. Just a group of us, 3 kids, I felt like I fit in for once, and I felt part of, and I didn't feel different. So, like, I carried that on with my addiction for years and years and years. And at age 13, I remember my mom was like, she's coming of age. She's a woman now. And we all went to Mill Valley with a group of women that were my aunties. And we went out to dinner. And, you know, I did a bunch of Coke and got to tink have champagne for my 13th birthday. So it was like, that was the kind of lifestyle we lived. Like, it was never no food on the table. It was never a messy house. We always had huge, elaborate parties that people would come around from all over the world to our house. My dad always tells a story about Willie Nelson being there at one of our parties. I remember at the lodge that I talked about when I was 6, I met Waylon Jennings. As a little kid, I remember the huge fireplace, them playing the slide guitar and them singing and playing the guitar, like stuff like that. You know what I mean? So people think, let me back up. I want to back up, and people see me as being a black woman and think that I was raised around crack and in the hood and this and that. No, motherfuckers. I was raised around cocaine cowboys, you know, like waking up in the middle of the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, and my stepfather and his buddies in their cowboy hats, cowboy boots, robes, and gun holsters, you know. Oh, so sorry. There we go. I feel like I'm very animated, so I have a hard time staying still. So, like, that's the kind of stuff I grew up around, you know, and I always feel like I need to, it doesn't really matter, but that's part of my not fitting in that I still carry at 52, that I need to, like, classify that. Like, I need to let you guys know. But it really doesn't matter. I don't know. I just went on a tangent.
Hearing that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for me, because I've known you for so long.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know this, right? Uh-huh. So this is like, because we talk about, like, a lot, sample size at once. This is normal to you.
Yeah.
Right? Waylon Jennings and all these guys, crazy cowboy parties
at
the house.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, like, coming out of that phase and into your own, right? Like, and where we hang out, we typically don't talk about where drugs took us, right? So there's, at a certain point, the party stops.
Yes.
Right? So, like, how long did it carry on like this, where it was just like big parties around the family, and where's that end up taking you, right?
So what ended up happening is actually my stepfather killed himself when I was 11. He killed himself because of this disease. And I felt like that had totally changed our lives, the dynamic of our lives. My mom and I no longer had stepbrothers. I no longer had that family anymore. And it kind of took my mom to a dark place for a while. I'm an only child. She raised me. And so what that did is it kind of changed the trajectory of our lives. And my mom actually got sober, but not clean. So she stopped drinking, but was still dealing coke and smoking weed and stuff like that. So that was still in my life. I was a full-blown addict by the time I was in junior high. So what that took me is some of the abuse that I endured as a child that I didn't realize I endured until I got older. Feeling less than and not good enough, I got together with my ex-husband at 15, and he was physically abusive, emotionally and verbally abusive, and I had 3 kids with him. And that just took us to even more addiction and more addiction and more addiction, and I didn't know how to get out of that. And so it took me into a deeper hole for a lot of years. I forgot what the question was, but I know it was leading to where did it take me?
Yeah, and even just touching on that, because I didn't understand this dynamic until I had a friend that was dealing with, spousal abuse, right? And that friend, at one time worked for the police department, helped women that were battered, and would be like, that would never happen to me, right? How does that how did you get away from that, right? Because I'm sure like there's people that are going to run into this that are dealing with all sorts of issues, and I don't understand that dynamic, right? Like what does that do to a person?
Well, I was completely broken, and one of the hardest things is that my mom I only had my mom. My dad's family are all in Texas, and I grew up with my mom only. And then my mom moved to Santa Cruz, and she got completely clean. And I was with my ex-husband, and I had no family in the town that I grew up with, only him and his family. And so how I actually got out of that is him and I had actually split up. We had another kid, our third kid. We were living together at his mom's house. And the physical abuse with him, I had finally had enough. He had punched me one last time, and I actually finally called the cops on him because, where I grew up, how I grew up, you never called the cops. You never called the heat. You kept your mouth shut. And that's the conditioning that I had. And so he finally went to jail, and I was able to have my own apartment. And I lost the apartment because of my addiction. But what I actually had to do is I had to pack up my duffel bag that I had only because I lived out on the streets for a while, and I actually packed up only myself and moved to Santa Cruz where my mom was to get clean. And I had to leave my kids and had to leave everything that I knew behind to leave that. And that was one of the things that I had to have counseling with my oldest son, with him, and I had to explain to him because he always carried the burden that he thought that I left him, and it wasn't him that I left. I had to leave, and I had to explain to him that if I did not leave, I would have ended up dying. I knew that I would end up either dead or in jail, one of the two. And so I needed to do something different for myself, and this is where the recovery part comes in, is I had a couple friends of mine that had gotten clean, and I always talk about the evolution of recovery. Like we are bent over, we look like hell, and we start standing up straighter, we start getting a job, we start getting a car, we start renting a home, and I saw that from a distance, and I wanted that so bad, but I just did not know how to get clean. I did not know how to stop using. And my mom, like I said, had gotten clean, and she had said, come to Santa Cruz and live here, and I'll help you get clean. And so, I got on a bus and took the duffel bag and the backpack that I only had. I didn't get to say goodbye to my kids. I didn't get to say anything to anybody, and I left because I was like broken. I had nothing. I'd been living on the streets. All my stuff was packed up in a garage, and literally had a duffel bag and a backpack, and moved to Santa Cruz and got clean. Like that's what I had to do for myself.
So that point right there, that was the bottom for you, huh?
That was the bottom. June 13th, 1999. Nice. I left. Yeah.
And so then going from this phase in your life and then going into recovery, what was your mental state like at that point? Like, I mean, you said you've seen these things and they were attractive to you and you've seen what was going on with people. Mm-hmm. But for yourself, could you imagine a life like you live today when you were in that process?
Absolutely not. At that time, I was 28 years old, and it is so weird because from the age, like say 13, 14, something inside me was telling me when you're 30, your life will be better. But I could not imagine what that life would be like. Using all of those years, I could never fathom what my life would be like after 30. I just could never imagine having a house, having a job, having all of the good things in life that people get when they grow up, normies, quote unquote. No, seriously, but quote unquote normies, having, that regular, when I was using, I would see people get up and like exercising and jogging and driving their kids to work. And that's when I was spun out and like trying to, find some semblance of like being able to go to bed or do anything. And I could not imagine anything beyond. And the life that I have now, it was just, I never could even imagine anything that I have going on now.
I would look at those people and be like, squares.
Yeah, right.
Past judgment.
Seriously, yeah.
I mean, I can vividly remember anybody doing the things that I enjoy today.
Yeah.
And clean.
Yeah.
I'd be like, what's wrong with this person?
Right.
Like, is this person sick?
I remember walking down the street with my kids in a stroller and some freaking lady stopping, a husband and wife stopping and being, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" And I remember barking at her. Because that's
like a dog.
Literally like a dog. I used to bark at people. And the funny thing is years later after getting clean, my husband's cousin's ex had a best friend that'd be like, you used to bark at us in school. Because it's like, get the fuck away from me. Like, that's the only thing I could do. I remember I could not look at people in the eye ever. And like, I'm looking at you in the eyes right now. I could not communicate to people. I could not look at people in the eye while I was talking. My friend used to laugh at me. She said, you have your eyes closed while you're talking to me. I'm like, because I did not have the ability to have a conversation eye to eye.
It's that constant state of fear, right?
Yeah, well, and that's also, I say growing up because I got together with my ex-husband at 15. Not being able to have an opinion, not being able to say anything, or else you get punched in the mouth, smacked, choked, whatever. So I was never able to really speak anyway. And you know me now, I'll tell you how it is. Like, I will say how I feel.
Yeah, and so now we're moving to Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
We got the duffel bag on our back,
Yeah.
the duffel bag on our back.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's time to get clean.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what does that look for you? Did you start going into like the 12-step process? Are you white knuckling it?
No. So what ended up happening is I moved with my mom, and my mom at that time, she had actually began to become a recluse. And so I thought to myself, if I go and move with her, I can help her out while she's helping me out. And so she laid down some ground rules. And one of the things I hated growing up with her is like, there's 3 golden rules in my house. And that's what she did. And I was like, fuck, I'm 28 years old. I'm a grown woman. You're telling me I got to be home at 10 o'clock at night? Kind of shit. But what ended up happening is for a week, my mom was a firm believer that you don't walk out of the house without cash in your hand, you know? And so she would give me a couple bucks here and there, and I'd go, I'm going to go to the beach. I would find somebody. On the bus on the way to Santa Cruz, I found somebody to get high with. By the time I stepped off the bus in Santa Cruz, I was already loaded. So that continued for about a week. I would hook up with people at the bus, at the beach, get drunk, do whatever. I was walking down the street. Some guy was like, hey, what's up? You know, go over to their house. I'm drinking and partying with this guy, you know, and like, you know, us as addicts, you know, we lie and manipulate. And that's when I remember one last week, I was only there for 5 days. I told my mom, I'm going to go babysit somebody's kids. And she's like, yeah, okay. That night was the 19th of June on a Friday night. I remember specifically, I got shit-faced so bad. I remember falling and had a huge bruise. I was stranded on freaking Capitola Avenue or whatever. And I went home to my mom, and it was like a moment of clarity. It's either pretend I'm on the phone, get picked up from the cops for being, you know, drunk in public or whatever. So I thought my mind was telling me that was going to happen, or walk up 3 blocks to my mom and face her in the condition that I was at. So something told me, just go home and face your mom the way you are. And I passed out that night, and she looked at me. She's like, what the fuck? And I remember passing out that night, and my mom woke up because we had talked about me going to a treatment facility, because that was the whole reason why I was there, is to get clean. And I woke up with a phone book smacked across my head and said, you know what, you need to make the call. I cannot. And if you can't make the call, you need to leave. So that was like the beginning of my new life. Yeah. And so I was able to call a treatment facility and go in the next day.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand about people like us is, like, there's even wiggle room at rock bottom.
Yeah.
Right? So here we are at your bottom, moving to a place to get clean, and still continuously using.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, at that point, you stayed clean from that point on?
I stayed clean from that day on. I have never used since that day. I've stayed clean 100% from that day forward. And I get questions like, oh, you can't drink? No, I can't. You can't have a hit off the joint? No, I can't. I choose not to because I know where it's going to lead me. I mean, I can't predict the future, but from my past, I can kind of take a look at what paths I was led in order to, you know, when I do those things. And so I have a choice. Do I want to act out like that and probably end up in the freaking gutter again, or just choose to not use at all? You know, and let me back up too. So my mom actually sent me money to get on the bus 2 weeks prior to that. And I spent that money because it was free money. I didn't have to do anything for it. Yeah. And I spent that money. And then 2 weeks later, she sent me money again. And she said, you know, like, you get on the bus or I can't do anything for you. And that's when I made the choice to get on the bus. But yeah.
Yeah. And so then you go and you start this process of recovery, right? And you get everything back right away, right? You get kids back, the dream job, right?
Well,
'Cause
not
that's what a lot of people
necessarily.
think.
That's what a lot of people think. So what ended up happening is there's at that time Janice had an 8-day detox, and I remember going in there, and I was able to use my good looks for whatever, not as much as somebody else could, but I was an attention. We like to call it an attention-seeking whore. You know what I mean? So my boobs were hanging out, and I had my skirt unbuttoned all the way, and taking direction is something I didn't do very well because I was always told what to do. I was never allowed to do what I wanted to do. So when I walked into that detox and he said, the first thing I need you to do is X, Y, and Z, button up your shirt and button up your sweater. Like, I was able to take direction. You know what I mean? And that was the beginning of my recovery process, is learning how to do something different. Not be like, what the fuck are you telling me to do? I was like, okay, I'm here for a reason. It's time for me to start doing something different. And I guess I'll follow some direction. And like we talk about the willingness, like I was able to have some willingness to do something different. Because like we talk about rock bottom, like I could either do death or be on the streets more. And I wanted something else from that. And did I get everything back? No, I didn't. But I worked my way. You know what I mean? I got clean. I decided to go to a 28-day program after that. After that, my mom said, you need to get a job. I went and got a job at Togo's. And then through networking with that, my dream job at that time was I wanted to work at a coffee roasting company. And I was able to network with somebody who was in recovery, was a manager of a Aptos coffee roasting company. I got hired on the spot there, because of my background of restaurant work. And so I worked towards things. Like from there, I was able to get a driver's license. Like I hadn't had a driver's license in 10 years. I hadn't had a driver's license since I was 18. And, got a job, got a driver's license, was able to buy my mom's car, was able to, rent a room, after a while, and was able to rent an apartment with a friend of mine. And then 2 years later, after being clean, is when I got my kids back. I had them in my life. I would get them for holidays and weekends and go visit them. But it was a process. What didn't happen overnight. Shit doesn't happen overnight for us. Yeah. We have to work really hard for it.
And these are like huge moments, right? Like you
yes.
can drive. So like where we hang out, like you can go in there and you'd be like, I got my driver's license.
Yes.
Back. And everybody's like,
yeah.
But you do that like in a regular place and you're like in your mid-20s, you're like, I got my driver's license.
Everybody's like, what
the fuck, right? And so
I got mine when I was 15. Well, that's good for you. Yeah,
So what does that support mean to a person that's going through that process, right? Because life can just keep kicking somebody, right? Keep kicking somebody. So what did the support of a fellowship mean to you while you're walking through this whole process, right? I mean,
it was amazing because it was a support that I never thought I would ever have because of where I was at with my ex-husband's family. I don't feel like as long as I was doing shit like from his mom, through his mom's eyes, as long as I was taking care of him, then my life would be okay. But it didn't matter. I wasn't so walking through the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous and people like clapping, you got 2 days clean. I remember going to a dance and somebody asking me, oh man, Joey, he died of this addiction. He was clean like 12 years. And I remember him saying, how much time do you have? And I was like, oh, I got 6 months. He's like, that's a fucking long time, bro. And like, that's what I learned how to tell people now. Like, you got 5 days. 5 days is a long time for somebody who's been using for years. Yeah. You know this. And so like that support, I remember when I got my kids, I would have friends of mine that would take my kids while I went to meetings so that I could get a meeting. You know what I mean? And my youngest son was off the rails, ADHD, didn't know how to sit still, didn't know how to be quiet. And she would take him even for a day so I could be able to like have my time and do my recovery and do what I needed to do for myself. She would take him and sit with him at the meeting because she had already had years clean and like support me in that way. So I learned how to support other women, like especially our meeting here in Los Banos. There would be people that would come with kids. I would walk outside with the kid because that's what people did for me. And I would stand up and say, listen, I have to be here. I'm sorry my kid is off the rail right now, but I have to be here with him. Because if I'm not here with him, I'm not here at all.
Yeah.
And I don't get to have him. And people would like, yeah, nod their head. I get it. Would some people get irritated? Yeah, but I don't give a shit. Like, I went through any means to get loaded. I'm going to do any means to stay clean.
Right. And so like today, like flash forward to today, like what keeps you around, right? Like, cause I mean, I know what your life looks like.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I have a damn good life.
It's pretty good, right? And so at this point, you're still plugged into recovery.
Yeah.
You're working it for yourself.
Yeah.
You're helping other people work it,
Yeah.
right? You're remaining open-minded and willing. Like,
Why?
why?
The reason being is because, like we always say, we can't keep what we have without giving it away. And I'm a firm believer. I always talk about the recipe of recovery. You know, you got to go to meetings. You have to have a higher power. You have to have a sponsor. You have to have a support group. You have to be of service. Those things right there are key to recovery. And like we said previously, is I never expected to have the life that I have today. You know, I just had 23 years clean on June 21st. And I think about it. I'm like, how the fuck did I end up with 23 years clean? I know how I ended up because I stuck around. I have a friend of mine who lives in another state, and she struggles with her addiction so bad. I watched her get a year clean, and then she got loaded. And she's been loaded off and on. Oh, no, she's been loaded this past, year and a half. And it's just Jared and I talk about it, and it's like, I can't even imagine how it feels to be constantly relapsing and going through whatever it is that she constantly goes through. And we talked the other day about her feeling judged when she walks into a room. I said, that's you judging yourself. Right. Yeah, somebody might judge you, but if anything, they're going to accept you with open arms, because for me, Narcotics Anonymous and recovery is home to me. You know, I can go anywhere in any state in any country and walk into a room and not know anybody, but I still feel at home. You know what I mean? Yeah, we can go on and on and on, and I know we have time, but it's just there's so many. I call it also gifts in recovery, and I don't mean because I have a fucking cool car, because I have a nice house, because I just remodeled my kitchen. I never ever thought I'd live a life where I'd be remodeling a kitchen, and I know that sounds crazy because normies out there are like, oh yeah, we remodeled our kitchen, it's normal for us. Well, this addict never thought that she'd be remodeling her freaking kitchen from ground up. You know what I mean? I thought I was gonna be in a cave for the rest of my life, but I don't forgot where I was going with that, because I'm so passionate. My mind just whirls about it so much. And that's the great thing is I don't have to be perfect in Narcotics Anonymous. We're allowed to make mistakes, because I was just telling somebody that yesterday. If we don't make mistakes in our life, we don't learn from those things. Right. And I feel like coming to NA and being in recovery, I've learned along the way through working the steps. Hello, let's do a plug for the steps. We get to learn about ourselves and the decisions that we make. So working the steps allows us to look at the decisions and the patterns that we have, so that we don't continue to do the shit that we did when we're out there getting loaded. And you know what? People aren't perfect in the rooms either, because we make mistakes. We do things that aren't always right, but and that's okay, because we're human. Yeah.
And so, because the hope for this whole podcast, right, is people that may not end up ever walking into the rooms of recovery. They may stumble on something like this, right? So, say there's somebody out there struggling, right, and they find this. What would you tell somebody like that, right? Somebody that's out there, and whether it be they're in an abusive relationship, right, to some of the things you've experienced, or they're out there in their addiction, they're on the streets, they don't see a way out, right? Or they're in a closet somewhere,
right?
What would you tell somebody?
What usually comes out of my mouth is, first things first, is give yourself a break. Right. Give yourself a chance. There's so many opportunities out there for us, especially walking into a room of recovery. We have opportunities that people, normies outside, would not automatically give us, because we're just addicts. Once an addict, always an addict. But those are the people who don't understand addiction also, and we get the ability to understand that. So going back to giving yourself a break. And also the next thing is the decisions that you're making for yourself is hard, and change is hard, but we have to walk through change. And the fear, because that's it right there, fear of something different. Most addicts do not want to sit there with a needle in the arm, with a fucking pipe in their mouth. You know what I mean? Most addicts are crying with a pipe in their mouth, crying with a needle in their arm, because they cannot stop using. So for myself to see somebody who's using and maybe might have a glimmer of hope in their life, it's about walking through the fears. I always say, when we are going to do something different in our life to walk through a fear, your life, if you don't change, is going to continue to be miserable. Yeah, you might be miserable, clean, or, that's life. But your life is not going to change because you're not willing to change. If you're willing to do something different, your life is going to change no matter what. Is it going to be rough at first? Hell yeah, it's going to be rough, but it's going to get better. But if you don't have the willingness to change, your life is just going to get rough, and it's going to stay rough, and it's going to stay rough, and it's going to stay rough. Same thing with being in an abusive relationship. When we are abused, whether we're male or female, because there are males out there who are in abusive relationships, we are broken mentally broken. A lot of times we get isolated and think that we have nothing else but this one person. And walking through the fear and walking out of that, like, your life is going to be tough at first, but it's not going to be the same as how tough it is right now. I just think of myself, like, shit was rough back then. And yeah, it was rough at first, but eventually it starts to get better. And we learn how to live life on life's terms. Yeah. So, it's about change and fear, walking through the fear.
So if you don't mind me sharing, I know that you've walked through some pretty difficult things in life, right? Mm-hmm. So I know you just lost your mother, yes, right? Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot about reservations in the program, right? Yes. And we talk a lot about walking through feelings that we haven't walked through before, yes, and not having to use no matter what, right? Like, so for somebody like you, or anybody, mm-hmm, right? Like, walking through something like that in your life, what did it mean to you? I know that it had to be painful to lose your mother, but what did it mean to you to get out the other side of that, right? Mm-hmm. And number one, not have to use over your feelings, and number two, like, what did you learn through that process?
It's really funny because you talk about reservations. That was my only reservation years ago, which was, if my mom passes away, I don't know if I'll be able to walk through it clean. And time went by. I worked through things. My mom and I had a really rough relationship. Always, as a kid, I found out through working the steps and through the past couple years ago that I was always my mom's mental caretaker. And when she passed, I was able to work through that reservation. Like, I think I'll be okay. And then when the time came where my mom started getting really sick last year, I'd actually come to acceptance that she's going to pass away soon. And her and I were able to work on our relationship. And then when she did pass away, and I got the phone call because I was there that weekend and we had to come home, I got the phone call that my mom had used. And what I did when I that she passed away, I hung up the phone, and the first thing I said to Jared was, I don't feel like I have to use over this. And that right there was one of the best feelings to ever have, that felt like I didn't have to run to drugs or alcohol to change the way I felt to walk through my mom's death. I talked about my stepfather killing himself. And so my husband's father and my stepfather killed themselves in the same year. Jared and I didn't know each other. He was 7? I was 11. We didn't know each other. So we both have this weird thing with death. Like, when people say, oh, so-and-so died. Oh, okay. Oh, how old were they? Oh, they were 95. Well, fuck, did you not think that it was coming soon? Right. Kind of stuff like that. So him and I have this weird thing around death. So when my mom's death came, I was already expecting it and was already preparing myself through working it with my sponsor, through working with my support group, and because her and I had kind of repaired the relationship as much as possible. I was almost, and it sounds shitty, I was very relieved that she had passed away because she had struggled for so many years, and she was no longer in pain. So I felt actually at peace with her death, so there was no feeling of like, I need to go get high, I need to cover up that feeling, and I just said to Jared yesterday, it's sometimes I think about it and I think, wow, my mom's gone, but I don't burst out into tears. I cried really hard one day. And it's not because I'm not in touch with my feelings, because I am. It just wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh my God, she's gone, and what am I gonna do? Like, I live a fairly good life. You know what I mean? And will it be hard that she's not here? Yes. But our relationship was a little rough in the first place. So and not that there was some celebrity out there. I'm glad my mom's dead. Like, I'm not glad that she's dead, but I'm grateful that she's not suffering anymore. So, I mean, How would I feel that way 15 years ago? Probably not. But today, being able to help my mom walk through that stuff, because being there at the convalescent home that she was at, being able to feed her and do those things, like I learned how to make a physical amends with my mom with that, just being able to be there for her. You know what I mean? So
those are the gifts of recovery.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
In learning like that acceptance along the way.
Mm-hmm.
I too have a weird thing with death.
Yes.
Right? Because I'm around it a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes I think I'm emotionally shut off.
Right.
You know, to the process. I see people grieve, and it's foreign to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
It doesn't feel real. And then, but I haven't lost a parent yet, right?
Right.
And so I don't know what that's like.
And that's the thing too, which is funny, because the gift of recovery, and not talking about my mother anymore, but my ex-husband. So, you know, we share 3 kids. Our kids are adults. I'm able to have a relationship with my boys and to have a relationship with my abuser. And I asked my kids, how's your dad doing? And we were just at our grandson's birthday party in August, and we can sit there together and socialize and joke around and talk, and I'm not cringing, and I don't have hate for him. I actually have compassion for the man, because, you know, he's struggled with his addiction, his life, and whatever it is that he's got going on. Like Narcotics Anonymous and being in recovery has taught me to have compassion for people and taught me how to pray for people that I wouldn't normally let. People are so full of resentment and piss and vinegar over other people. It's like I choose to not live that way. So, you know, that gift is that I'm able to have compassion for my ex-husband, for somebody who used to beat the shit out of me. You know what I mean? And like I don't have to be miserable and angry towards him anymore and have any resentments. I've worked through that stuff. And that's a gift. We always like to say in recovery, we have a gift because we're able to walk through things and forgive people for things that normal people, quote unquote, would never be able to do. So, you know, that's a gift. And that right there, I mean, normally, you know, people would be like, fuck that person. Well, you know, I feel bad for him. So
you learned empathy.
I did.
I
did.
Right?
Very much so.
And so what goes through your mind, right? Like, because you're a lot further in this process than I am, right, by far. You know, years, everything else. Like when you see the person on the side of the street, right, or you see, you know, somebody dealing with mental health issues, like, what do you think, right? Like, is it automatically compassion? Are you maybe upset knowing that there's a way to get out of that? Like,
it's compassion 100%. When I see an addict on the street, first thing I think is, there go I. You know, that was me. Whew, you know, I feel bad for them. You know, and especially somebody struggling with mental health, because a lot of times people say, oh, the homeless, they're this and that, they're just a bunch of addicts. Well, people normally don't understand that a lot of those people are addicts because they're dealing with their mental illness that they haven't gotten any help for. They use drugs and alcohol on the streets to be able to deal with whatever mental issues they have going on. You know, we have a thing that's called dual diagnosis. You're diagnosed with mental illness and diagnosed with addiction.
right.
And so when I see those people, sometimes I'm like, you know, my kids used to get mad at me. Mom, that guy's asking for money, because my kids are so thoughtful. They always want to give homeless people money. I'm like, I'm not giving them money because they're probably going to use it on dope. You know, I'd rather give them water or give them food. And so that's what my kids started doing. You know, my kids started buying them food and cases of water. Here you go, instead of giving them $20, because they understand also addiction, because they've seen me at one side and then see me clean now. So, you know, it's just nothing but compassion I feel for people out there, you know.
So is that like ring true in your head right away? Because like for me, sometimes I'm like, what the fuck's this guy doing?
Yeah.
Right? Like I
Well, because we see twiggers on the streets tripping.
Yeah, it takes me a second. Sometimes my first thought isn't always compassion, right? But again, like coming from I've never been on the streets.
Right.
So, you know, like understanding that process, right? Like I don't get it, right? Like some people, I feel like I'm not qualified to help because I've never been there. I don't know what it's like.
Yeah, but doesn't mean, I mean, It doesn't really matter. Like for me, I remember being on the streets with my kids, 2 of my kids, because I hadn't had my third. I was walking down the street with a red wagon with my kids in a red wagon. I think I had $2 in my pocket. My oldest was like, Mom, I'm hungry. Mom, I'm hungry. I remember all I could do was go to like a 7-Eleven and get a bag of popcorn. That's when I used to sell popcorn at convenience stores, like a bag of popcorn and something else. And like, so I see women on the streets with their kids and I'm just like, man, that's so sad, you know? And just because you have not experienced that yourself doesn't mean that you don't have support from other people who've experienced that. So it's like, that's the thing, is we're a community. That's the great thing, is we are a community. We're not just one-on-one, because like we say, never alone. We can't do this alone. We're a community. So if we don't have the answer, that's what I tell my sponsees too. If I might not have an answer or the experience that you're coming to me with, trust and believe I'm going to go to my sponsor and maybe I might get some help with that. And that's why I say we have that community where just because you have never experienced homelessness, there's people that you've been around who have, and you can discuss that with somebody else and be able to bring that to, say, a sponsee who's dealing with whatever.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I wanted to touch on is because how do you go about repairing those relationships with your children, right? Because I know today you're a grandma, right? Which you might not want me to say.
No, I don't mind. I'm very proud of being a grandmother.
Well, you're not a grandma. You're
a Gigi.
You're
yeah,
Gigi,
yeah. I always say I'm not a granny. I'm not a nana. I'm too fucking fabulous for that. I'm a Gigi. You know?
So how do you go from that process of taking the kids in the red wagon, them walking through your addiction with you, you changing your lives, them having to accept this,
me abandoning them,
yeah, and then building relationships not only with them but with your grandkids.
Right. And how I did that and what that looks like is learning how to show up.
Right.
Learning how to show up. I had a sponsor. So my sponsor that I chose her because she was a single parent. She was going to school. She had her own place. She had a car and she had a job. And I wanted what she had. And that's what we say. Look for a sponsor that they have what you want. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be a parent. I wanted to have a job. I wanted to go to school. I wanted my own place. I wanted a car. And she taught me how to show up because I was always two days late for everything. And that's one of the things she told me. You fucking left your kids. So this is what we're going to work on. I'm going to take you, drive you to Santa Rosa. We're going to rent a hotel room. We're going to go pick up your kids. And I'm going to teach you how to show up for them because they do not trust you. All they know from you is abandonment and no trust at all. So if you say that you're going to be there at 3:00 and you're 10 minutes away and you know you're going to be there at 3:02, you're going to call them and let them know that you're going to be there at 3:02. Because as soon as that clock hits 3:00 and you're not there, they're going to feel abandoned all over again. And we're going to teach you how to not do that to them anymore. And that's one of the things. My kids know. If I say I'm going to do something, they know Mom's going to do it. No matter if I've set boundaries with them. I've kicked my kid out because he was getting loaded in my house. Like, you're not going to get high in my house. I've set those boundaries with you. These are the rules. Remember I told you about the rules that my mom gave me? I gave them and I had to kick my kid out at 19 because he was getting high at my house.
And your rules look a lot different.
Yeah, but I guarantee you, I do what I say I'm going to do. If I say I'm going to be there at 3, I'll be there at 3. I go visit my son all the time. Usually I'm there about 12. He knows I'll be there at 12. Usually I'm there early. So I learned how to show up on time and to be early for things because I was always late. And it's about building those relationships. It's about building that trust that I had because they didn't trust me. And I was able to build that. And also because of the relationship that I had with my ex-husband's mom, the way she treated me, I vowed that I would never be that way with my son's girlfriends. And my oldest son, Michael, when I went to go meet his newest girlfriend, I remember Michael had to go to work and we were all eating together. And she's like, oh, well, Michael's going to take me. And he had to go over here to Portland. And I said, we can just drop you off at the house. Well, first of all, I said, are you going to come with us? You're coming with us, right? To go eat. And she's like, oh, I figured it was, your family time. I looked at her dead in the eye. I said, you are family. Even though I just met her, I'd only known her for 20 minutes. I looked her in the eye, said, you're family. You're my son's girlfriend. You are family to me. And I made a vow that I would always treat my son's girlfriends the way I want to be treated. And so I was able to develop relationships with them. And she Michael told me after that, because I was able to give her a ride home and I gave her a hug and everything. Michael called me and said, Mom, Carly really, really, really was happy that you called her family and that you gave her a ride and that you gave her a hug. She wasn't expecting all of that. And I said, because that's how I feel in my heart. Like, I want my kids' girlfriends or wives to know that, like, I'm there for them. Right. So, it just means a lot to me.
So, like, you're living this life of just breaking cycles.
Yes.
Right? And over and over and over again. And so, like, what does that mean to you? And how have you seen it change the relationships with your kids and their kids, right? Are you seeing, like, the ripple effect from the work you've done?
Yes, I am. So my middle son, all my kids were never allowed to feel. My oldest son is shut off from any emotion at all. My middle son has always been, like, the super emotional one. The youngest has always been the emotional one. So the relationship that I have with, especially my middle son, is, they were never allowed to feel. What are you crying for, you pussy? You're not allowed to feel that way. So whenever he's feeling happy or sad, he's the one who calls me first. Let me know that he got a new job. Let me know. Or if he's really upset, at the job that he was before, he was always having a hard time. He would call me up. I just needed to vent to somebody. And like, I'm that safe person for them, and being able to develop relationships with them and be that safe person for them, and also be that safe person for them to, like, I get to pick up my grandson and, like, he gets to come and stay with me. My son and his wife are now separated, but, like, I get to pick him up anytime I want, and she feels safe knowing the person that I am. I get to take my grandson and bring him to my house. They live 3 hours away. Like, if I was an addict or if I wasn't in recovery, I don't believe that I would have that same opportunity. So I'm a safe person in their lives, and I've been able to become that person, the person that I truly am, and my kids, even to them, like, my son was having a hard time because his son wasn't eating. And I looked him in the eye and I said, listen, Michael, your kid, you're not going to let him starve to death, right? Well, no, of course not. I said, if he's not hungry right now, you don't have to get mad at him because he's not eating. He'll eat when he's hungry. You're more pissed because you had to get up and make him something to eat than you are pissed that he's not eating. And he went, whoa, yeah, you're right. So, like, I get to be that example to them too, and be able to, I don't give my kids advice. I was at my son's baby shower with him and his girlfriend, and they always have a baby shower, advice for the new parents. And I literally wrote on the card, I don't have any advice for you because you're going to do whatever the fuck you want. And he laughed at that. He laughed at that. But guess what? When he had his daughter for the first time, when his wife was at work and he was alone for her, he called me up and said, like, I'm having a hard time. She's crying. I don't know what to do. I'm all, just allow her to cry. Just do whatever you need to do. He's like, I got mad at her. I kind of started yelling. I'm all, that's okay. Just know that this is not what you want to do in the future. Just know of how that feeling that you have right now in your gut and in your heart, how you feel bad about yelling at her because she's crying. Like, you're not going to do that again. And he's like, yeah. So, like, I get to be that person. Yeah. And I never thought that I was going to be able to be that person. This person, Malcolm, my middle son, like, he never came back to live. He lived with me for 4 months after I got clean. After that, he always lived with his dad and his grandma. He named his daughter, his daughter's middle name is Victoria, which is his grandmother. He's got a tattoo of his grandmother's name on his arm. Did it make me sting? Yeah. But you know what? I get the things that she doesn't get. Yeah. You know what I mean? He calls me. I have this amazing relationship with him. And that's because I continue to show up. Because, like I said, I'm always that person who does what I say I'm going to do. And he FaceTimes me. We get to go on a freaking vacation to Hawaii on Thursday with his wife and baby. And, like, I get to be that person. Yeah. So, I mean, it's amazing. The relationships that I've been able to build with my boys because of being consistent, because of being a member of Narcotics Anonymous, because of working my steps, because I don't want to be the person that I was when I was loaded, that their dad was to them. I want to be safe to them, and I'm able to be that person. So, yeah.
So I think you, like me, like, the most valuable things that I've gotten in my recovery is the ability to show up and build relationships.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
But so, just like one more thing before closing is, so do you remember a moment, because there's things that happen, right, that are huge, right? to the other person on the other end, they may be minuscule, whether it's a hug or something like that, right? You and your husband have been part of many of these moments for me, right? When I'm struggling and nobody wants me around, right? And you guys throw me in a car and take me somewhere, or just there, right? Like, is there a moment or something that happened to you early on that may have changed everything for you?
In recovery or just in life?
Recovery, life, I mean.
Oh, and I know that in life, that's one of the things too, is I know before I got clean, I had wanted to get clean. I just didn't know how. And I remember there was a decision that I made with my ex-husband. We were supposed to go kick it or something. We weren't together anymore. And I remember we were in the car and we're going to go drive to Santa Rosa. We lived in Hillsburg, which is about 20 minutes away. And I said, you know what? Stop the car, turn around, drop me off. And I think there were 2 instances like that with him. And I think that if I had not made that decision to say no, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Right.
And then also getting clean. I've always struggled with relationships. It was always one of those things, always struggling with relationships, even friendships to this day. I remember a friend of mine, I was about 1.5 years clean. She walked up to me at a meeting, and she got clean when she was 15. So she's coming up on 30 years clean in January. She walked up to me at a meeting on a Friday night and said, do you want to be my friend? Like, we were 2 little girls on a playground. You want to be my friend? And I was like, yeah. And we were inseparable. And we were inseparable for years. That was like my bestie. And then we both got married, and she moved away to Concord, and we weren't hanging around. We would talk to each other maybe a month or two, maybe 3 or 4 months would go by, and we would talk to each other on the phone. And then we decided there's a women's convention that goes on every year. It's called the Circle of Sisters. Oh, man, I just wiped my eyebrow. No! That's the defining factor right there. No. We decided to go to a Circle of Sisters convention together, and that was 4 years ago, and we've been inseparable once again since then. And those are life-changing things for me. Like, her and I, she had this thing in her mind that I didn't like her for some reason. She was always insecure around me. And we were able to talk about that. We were able to walk through some things that I had gone through in my life at that time. And we have talked to each other pretty much every day since then. And we were able to come back together. And like, it doesn't matter if she's in Italy at work or she lives in Reno now. And we are just like each other's person. And to be able to have that, and that was like life-changing for me, that we were be able to come back together and be the friends that we've always been. But like that support for each other, like that was life-changing for me, because then it was never that question of, I've always questioned myself, if I ran into me and saw me as a person, would I want to be my friend? And that is that little girl that I didn't talk about, being 6 and looking in the mirror and saying, you're going to be alone for the rest of your life. Nobody's going to ever want to be with you. You're ugly and you are nothing, at 6. And so moving forward to that, would I want to be my friend? I would probably look at me and go, you're a fucking bitch, first of all. But I really love you because you're cool. You know what I mean? And I've never wanted to be the cool person. I'm just, I'm all right, So
Oh, you're pretty cool.
Yeah, well, thank you. But you know what I mean? Like, those were life-changing things for me in recovery and outside of recovery. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what, a lot of us, we hang around a little while and we forget about that stuff, right? Like the hug that we get when nobody wanted to touch us.
Right.
Or just somebody saying hi,
Well,
right?
the funny thing, too, is I was at a women's retreat just last month, and there's a woman there that I guess a couple of years ago at the same retreat, she was sitting on a bench by herself. And I was like, hey, come on and join the group, which I did with Johnny, who just passed away. I remember him telling him, come with the group, come with the family. He's always sitting at the end of the table. I said, you're home now. We are your family. And he always said that's what kept him coming, is that I opened my arms to him and said, come join the family. And she said to me at the retreat just recently, last month, she said, I remember you walking up to me and saying, hey, welcome, come with us, come be with the family. It looks like you're sitting here by yourself. What's going on? And I learned that doesn't matter who we are, like, just we just need to be together. You know what I mean? Just that feeling of being all alone for so many years. I don't want people to feel that way.
Right.
So.
Yeah, because I remember, coming in, and it was the first time I came in, I have a vague recollection of walking into the room at Colorado Ballpark.
Uh-huh.
There's like 6 people in there.
Yeah.
And I cried the whole time, right? And the people that stood out were you and your husband, right?
Mm.
And just taking that extra second with me at that point in my life.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't willing at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And planting that seed,
yes.
and then years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And your husband will never admit that he would come in here to check on me, and because he said he just liked the flowers, but I still reaffirmed that he was checking on me all those years. So I knew where to go.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I was fortunate.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the point of this whole thing is people just don't know where to go.
Right, right.
Right? And man, I just appreciate this time.
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate you taking this time with me.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we'll do it again.
Yeah.
But thank you, Gabriella.
You're very welcome.
That
My
was
pleasure.
awesome.
Yay.
We ended it with a hug.
Yeah, of course.
It should always end with a hug.